my AP historians. This is Wendy with AP History Help, and this is the AP History Help podcast, where you will learn everything you need to know about taking AP history classes, from skills to content, from historical thinking skills to themes in history. Whether you are taking or thinking about taking AP World History, AP US History, or AP European History, this podcast is for you. Be sure to check out the episode list and the show notes to find the topics that you need help with. Email me at wendy@aphistoryhelp.com with questions that I might answer on future episodes. You can also follow and interact with me on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at AP History Help. Why is everyone so freaked out by the DBQ essay on the AP exam? Maybe you don't understand what to do and how to do it. I promise you that if you break down each part and understand what each point of the rubric entails, it's not that bad. And lean in real close, because this is something that I'll share with you, my listener. This is my sweet spot. This is where I am an expert, and I can coach you on how to get a 7 on this essay. That is the perfect score, by the way. Today I'm going to lay the foundation for you to be off and running with your DBQ essay. You will be the envy of your AP history friends. And if you plan to take another AP history course next year or the year after, you will use the same skills to hit the ground running at the beginning of the course with amazing skills. But keep in mind that I am your coach. You are the player here, and every good coach will tell you that practice is key. More on that later. If you haven't done so already, make sure that you listen to my last episode, Short Answer Questions Have Long Answers, where I talked about strategies and a formula for writing 27 to 45 sentences and getting full credit. The good news is that if you didn't listen, you can just go to your podcast player or my website, aphistoryhelp.com, or even to YouTube and look for episode 9 of AP History Help. That's right. They're all on demand for your listening pleasure. As we're approaching the end of the semester, it is really time for you to start reviewing. That's right. If you are striving for that 5, you need to get a little more serious about your preparation. Have you checked out my AP History Success Journal? It's available for print on my website and hopefully coming soon on Amazon. Now, on today's episode, first we'll look at the particulars of the document-based essay question, including timing and weighting and the rubric. And then in the second half of the episode, I'll talk about breaking down the essay writing and strategies to earn each point. The DBQ essay is the first part of section 2. And you are given a total of 1 hour and 40 minutes for section 2. It is strongly recommended that you spend 40 minutes on part 2, the LEQ, which we'll talk about next episode, and 60 minutes on the DBQ essay, including the first 15 minutes, which the College Board suggests you spend reading the documents. Notice that there are a lot of qualifiers in what I was saying in the last sentence or two. Strongly recommend, suggest. That means you are given 1 hour and 40 minutes to do whatever you want. However, if you want to be successful on the exam, you should save the last 40 minutes to devote to the LEQ. And in the first hour of section 2, they want you to keep that pen down to get a good handle on understanding the documents. In general, I agree with those recommendations. The DBQ is worth 25% of your overall exam grade, and it's usually easier to write than the LEQ because you have a lot of documentary evidence to use in your writing. It is worth a total of 7 points, and it's important to remember that you earn points. You don't lose them. What do I mean by that? Well, Let's say that you decide to put down 2 pieces of evidence beyond the documents. The first is correct and it earns you the point, but later the second is just wrong. By itself, you wouldn't have earned the point, but because you got the point from the first example, you don't lose the point because you put something wrong in your essay. Also, as I transition into talking about the points of the rubric, I want you to make note of what is not in there. There is no mention of grammar, spelling, usage, or excellent writing skills. This essay is meant to measure your skills and ability to work with documents. The essays are read and graded by history teachers, not English teachers. Do not get all fancy in your writing. I have read essays that are quite choppy in their style, but because they check off each of the rubric points, they earn 6 or 7 points. I tell my students that when they write for AP History, they need to imagine taking off their English composition hat and putting on their AP History hat. Literally imagine doing that to help your brain shift from one type of writing to another. Next, let's take a look at those 7 points and how to earn them. Each point basically stands alone. You don't have to earn one to get another. And regardless of which AP History class you're taking, the rubric and the format are exactly the same. So once you learn it for AP World, let's say you will know how to write it for APUSH and AP Euro. However, the time periods that the DBQ prompts can be about differ. For AP World, it's 1450 to 2001. APUSH is 1754 to 1980. And for AP Euro, it's 1600 to 2001. Okay, the first point is for writing a thesis that does 2 things. You need to respond to the prompt and defend it using a line of reasoning. For example, if the prompt says, evaluate the extent to which European explorers wanted to convert the indigenous people to Christianity, that's a prompt that all 3 courses could relate to. In your thesis, you would say something to the effect of, European explorers had many motives for their conquests, including converting the natives to Christianity. However, a greater reason would be the desire for riches and glory. Now, we know from our study of history that that was the case. However, make sure you've read the documents you are presented with before deciding what line of reasoning you are going to defend. But do you hear that I've restated the prompt and also indicated what I am going to prove in my essay? That's what you need to do in your thesis. Your thesis statement can be at the beginning of your essay, the end of your essay, or it's best if you put it in both places, like an introduction and a conclusion. And by the way, nowhere in the rubric points does it say you have to write a conclusion. Don't feel the pressure to do so if you're running low on time. It is not a requirement. A conclusion is not required. Your teachers might make you write it, but for the exam, you are not required to write a conclusion. You got that? I don't want any questions about that one. Are we required to write a conclusion? No. Okay, so the next point is for contextualization. For this point, you are merely painting the picture of what happened before the time period in which you are about to write. Using our example from the thesis point, you might want to write about why the Europeans ended up in the Americas in the first point. Other options for context would be geographic context, like what was happening nearby that's related. Or you could even use what happened after the time period you're writing about. Whichever you choose, think of this point as the crawler that rolls along at the beginning of a movie to bring you up to speed with what's about to happen. or at the end to tell you what the movie was the cause of in the bigger picture of the world. Contextualization should be at least a couple sentences, and it's usually at the very beginning, just like that movie crawler. Write it before the thesis. The next 2 points are specifically working with the documents. You are given 7 documents relating to the prompt. You must use at least 4 of them to support your argument in response to the prompt. Now, in doing so, you must first show you understand what the documents mean, and then second, how they support your argument. By the way, future episode about analyzing documents. Anyway, 1 point for demonstrating and understanding, and 1 point for using as support. Let me emphasize here and later because it's important. Do not use only 4 documents. I know that's what it says. But what if you misunderstand one and or use it incorrectly? Then you lose these 2 points. Use at least 5 of the documents as insurance, or better yet, as I'm going to get to in a moment, use all 7 of them. 3 points to go for a 7 here. So the next point is for showing that you have 1 piece of knowledge in your head about the topic that you use as evidence to support your argument. Think of it as another document. And again, if you know more than 1 thing about the topic that you can use as evidence, put it down. See that last topic. It becomes insurance in case you misremember something. Okay, we are now at the sourcing or analysis point. Some of my colleagues, your teachers, ask you to develop HIP or HAP statements. And this is why. For at least 2 of the documents, you need to explain how or why the document's point of view, purpose, historical situation, and or audience is relevant to an argument. Think of this as vetting your sources. This document was written by Thomas Jefferson, who was an anti-federalist and wanted to ensure that people's basic rights were spelled out in the Constitution. So he was against a strong central government, leading him to discredit a national bank. You only need to do this twice, but you know what I'm going to say by now, I hope. Do at least 3. Or, as I'm about to cover here, make it more like 4 or 5. The good news on the 7th point, the complexity point, is that it is no longer the elusive unicorn point. It is more attainable than it has ever been. Complexity expects that you show an understanding of the historical development that is the focus of the prompt through sophisticated argumentation and or effective use of evidence. What does that mean? A sophisticated argument is examining multiple themes or perspectives, explaining both sides of your historical thinking skills like cause, effect, or change in continuity, and explaining relevant connections within and across periods or geographic areas. This is the hard way, although not impossible. The effective use of evidence, it's almost a piece of cake though. Just use all 7 of the documents to support your argument and HIP analysis for 4 documents instead of just 2. And integrate your outside evidence with your documents. My advice to get to this point, use all 7 documents, show analysis through HIP statements on 5 documents, and if the prompt is asking about change, discuss also a continuity, or if it's asking about causes, discuss an effect. Just like the old rubric, bear down on points 1 through 6. Get those down and perfect so you can do them in your sleep. And then and only then would I recommend thinking about going for that 7th point. Although I'm a lot quicker to recommend it now with the change in the rubric than I was about 4 months ago. All right. In the second half of this episode, I'm going to share some tips and tricks and strategies for acing the DBQ. Not as many as I would like because of time constraints, so I have more in the future. All right. So first, that 15-minute reading time at the beginning, here is what you should really be doing in the first 15 minutes. Start by reading the prompt. Really read it. The prompt as many times as you need to make sure that you understand exactly what it's asking you to do. The sample prompt I'm going to work with going forward is evaluate the extent to which European imperialism affected economies in Africa and or Asia in the 19th and early 20th century. That phrase, evaluate the extent to which, what does that mean? You are going to have to figure out to what extent something did something, and evaluate it. Evaluate means forming an opinion and rating, so really good, really bad, somewhere in the middle, perhaps, but make sure you are not only keying in on the content, but those verbs. The topic is European imperialism's effect on the economies of Africa and or Asia in the 19th and early 20th century. So what are you evaluating? The Europeans? The Africans? No, you're evaluating imperialism. Not by itself. You're evaluating how European imperialism affected those economies. So more precisely, you are evaluating the effects of imperialism. See how you really need to wrap your brain around that prompt? Don't overlook it, because if you don't respond to what the prompt is asking you to do, you have likely just blown your thesis, one of your document's points, and the complexity point. Now, that last part, looking at the prompt, should take you about 3 minutes. Next, staying with the prompt, time to brainstorm. Make a T-chart on that blank sheet of paper in your test book that says end of section 1 on it. It's okay. You can write on it. On one side of your T-chart, write context, and on the other side, write topic. Now, tap into your brain. What do you know about that topic that led to this time, this place, this topic? Briefly write it down under context. And then, what do you know about the topic? Think people, places, events, etc., and write that under topic. This will help you later when you write your contextualization and when you have to come up with evidence beyond the documents. And don't worry if you're drawing a blank. When you start to read the documents, hopefully something will come to you and you can jot it down when it does. That process should take you about 5 minutes, depending on how much you know in advance. So about 8 minutes into those 15. And now you can start reading the documents. But when you do, for each one, you should be asking yourself how each one responds to the prompt. So document 1, how does it relate to the effects that imperialism had on, which is it, Africa, Asia? What was the effect? Was it good? Was it bad? What else is significant about each document? Notice place, time, author, audience. As you continue to look at each document, ask yourself if you could use some documents together to support the same point. Think about which groups they could be in. Are the social, political, economic, or cultural effects? Write it in the margins of the documents. Circle, underline, draw arrows. Reading the documents should not be a passive undertaking. Repeat for all 7 documents. You should take about 10 minutes for that. Don't worry if it takes you longer than that. But the more you practice this process, the more efficient you will get. Remember me? I'm your coach. At this point, you should have a good idea of how the documents could be used to support an argument, which means you can start to develop your thesis. For example, by the way, I'll copy this thesis into the show notes so you can follow along with me where I'm going with it. Western European imperialism resulted in the exploitation of labor and resources on non-industrialized nations in Africa and Asia. This benefited the Europeans, either by exploiting the labor of indigenous peoples to gather resources or to expand the markets to yield the most profit and causing economic decline in Africa and Asia. So I wanted to give you a complete thesis statement to clue you into a great strategy. Your thesis statement should be an outline for your body paragraphs. What you say in your thesis statement should be broken into the 2 or 3 claims and turned into 2 or 3 topic sentences that will start each body paragraph. For example, labor and exploitation of resources on non-industrialized nations in Africa and Asia resulted from Western European imperialism. Then that whole paragraph pulls from the documents that have evidence to support that claim. Wow. Okay, I'm running out of time. I've already gone over longer than I wanted to, but did you know I teach a 6-week course on OutSchool on writing the DBQ essay? We go into more detail about the points of the rubric, reading and analyzing the documents, writing analysis statements, and more. Each session is 45 minutes long, and it's been taken by 78 students, and it has a 5-star rating on OutSchool, I'm proud to say. I have a session that starts December 14th and another one on February 1st. In addition to learning about each of the points, we also spend a lot of time looking at exemplars. As a bonus, if you write a DBQ between the 5th and 6th session, you get a free evaluation from me with feedback for improvement. I really enjoy teaching that class, and I especially love it when I hear from my former students in July how confident they were on the exam and finding out that they got 4s and 5s. Anyway, email me if you still have questions about the DBQ at wendy@aphistoryhelp.com. Next episode, I'll be breaking down the LEQ, the long essay question, what to expect from the prompts, the rubric, and how to get the points and additional tips, tricks, and strategies. Hit that follow or subscribe button so you'll be notified whenever a new episode airs. Do me a favor and email me at wendy@aphistoryhelp.com. If you have any questions or suggestions, or just to tell me that you listened or watched the show, or if you're needing feedback on a DBQ. Hey, if you email me and tell me that you listened to this episode, I'll give you 25% off that DBQ class that I mentioned. That's wendy@aphistoryhelp.com. You can also follow me on Instagram and TikTok at aphistoryhelp. Did you know that this podcast also airs in video form on YouTube? The people who watch it on YouTube knew that. Hey, YouTubers, did you know that you could listen to this in audio-only form? Anyway, the YouTube channel is called AP History Help. I'll link to it in the show notes. If you subscribe there, you'll get notified every other week when a new episode is uploaded. Whether it's social media or YouTube, you'll be able to comment, ask questions, and interact with me. Tell your friends who are taking or thinking about taking AP History classes about the podcast. I'm here to help as many students as possible to be successful on the course and in the exam. That will do it for this episode. Don't forget to come to Wendy for AP History Help. And this episode of AP History Help podcast is now history.